Hello and welcome to our Maths and English webinar. This is a recorded session released ahead of our regular live series webinar, which will be kicking off shortly. These webinars follow on from the Functional Skills webinar series that we ran last year. Our plan is to ensure that these will be shorter than the last series, as we know some of our listeners struggle with listening to them at the end of their day. This session is called Go Live, firstly starting off with bringing everyone up to speed with the functional skills reforms, especially where there have been changes to some of the things we might have indicated during the earlier webinars and launch events. When we do the live webinars, there will be an opportunity to ask questions via the chat. So let's meet the team.
For those of you who've already taken part in our Fun Skills 2019 webinars, you'll notice that we've got some new up-to-date photos. More flattering, hopefully, I might add, ensuring the cameras and lighting were a little bit more forgiving. So we have myself, Paul Cassini. I'm what we call a technical advisor. So I kind of work from the sector, working in the sector, but supporting the sector with all aspects of maths, English, and sometimes a little bit of employability as well. We also have Amanda Kelly, our industry manager, who is will be joining us sometimes for some of these sessions as well.
And I'm Catherine Cooper. I'm also a technical advisor working in the role.
So if you're new to these webinars, or you're new to this you haven't taken part in any of our previous functional skills reforms, you can find a lot more information about the functional skills reforms and other aspects of our Maths and English pages, our Maths and English kind of offer on these update pages. The link on these slides will take you straight there. Remember, what we will always do after the live sessions is send out a link to the recording and the slide deck a day or so after each webinar. This will enable you to access the information covered and enable you to watch the recording at your leisure.
Also, if you haven't already done so, please sign up for our email updates. You can do this by clicking on the link that appears at the bottom of every City and Guilds webpage under Tools and Support, where you choose your preferences and we will keep you up to date. So let's see if you're up to date with us. We're kicking off with our regional network meetings. We have been doing some in November, and we've got some more running in December and in January. You can find more dates on the Functional Skills Updates page. Our first theme was English Level 1, Level 2, and we've still got a few of these events running over into December. We'll be then focusing on different themes. So we've got Mathematics at Level 1 and Level 2 running December and January. Then we move on to Functional Skills English at entry level, Functional Skills Mathematics at entry level, ESOL Skills for Life and Employability. So Paul and I are literally back on the road and hope to be home hopefully for Christmas and then probably in the summer. I think that's it, isn't it, Paul?
It's looking busy next few months, isn't it? So, yeah.
Dates and locations for the next wave are coming soon. So if you're a City and Guilds customer and you want to attend these free events, just go to the Functional Skills Updates page, choose the Regional Networks Meetings drop down and register your preferred network meeting. We know our meetings get filled up really quick, so ensure you register sooner rather than later.
And just to say, obviously, as we've said, we are adding more and more of these dates, so there will be kind of more appearing. So keep checking, even if you see that the dates kind of up there aren't necessarily convenient for you, there will be more kind of coming over the coming months. So as we indicated, the main focus of this session is really making sure everyone's up to date with the functional skills reforms and understanding some of the key differences. Anyone who went to our launch events over the summer will know that there are quite a few changes to the rules and expectations around administering the qualifications assessments. It's always been important to keep live assessment material confidential and secure, but as you can see here and reiterated on this slide, we're now quite a bit more prescriptive and a bit more stringent about what that means. Crucially, there's now specific instructions for conducting examinations and ICE document for the externally assessed components of functional skills at level 1 and level 2. As well as consolidating this information in one place, it contains much clearer instructions about storing, handling, transporting papers, who can and can't be an invigilator, what to do with any unused papers. We'll always ask you to return those, and also that you need to now tell us about any date changes. It's also worth noting here that we've introduced some changes to the process by which we allocate exam papers. So for the new qualifications, we are able to ensure that no candidate will receive each paper version more than once. Moving on to the management of live assessment material for entry level.
The new reform brought an increased focus on the exposure of live materials at all levels. For entry level, this means live assessments should only be printed off up to 1 week before the assessment is due to take place. Only for those who are responsible for administrating the entry-level assessments can have access to the live materials. A record of rotation of titles must be kept by the centre. These will be inspected by your EQAs. Also, during your external quality assurance visit, you will need to demonstrate how they are meeting all the new requirements. Now, moving on to instructions for conducting exams at Level 1 and Level 2. As we mentioned earlier, this document will give you more guidance around the new regulations. Within the ICE document, there is more guidance on choosing an invigilator. As we know, if you teach or prepare a candidate for a functional skills subject, you cannot invigilate that subject. Recently, Ofqual published an additional statement allowing awarding organisations to decide where to allow exceptions on the grounds of restrictions within the centre on the grounds of security, of safeguarding, or where an assessment is conducted at the candidate's workplace and an assessment centre is not available locally, or the remote location of the candidate's workplace assessment location, or as part of a reasonable adjustment request for a specific learner. If any of these apply to your situation and you believe you may need an exception, you will need to complete a short form describing your situation and the actions you will take to mitigate any risk to live assessment materials or potential conflicts of interest. You can find the link to the form at the bottom of the slide. The ICE document has also been updated to reflect these changes, so it is really important to ensure you have the most updated documents.
Also some changes to the process by which Level 1 and Level 2 exam dates and times can be changed after they've been booked with us. Significantly, we do now expect exams to take place on the day and the time and in the location for which they've been booked, unless there are genuinely exceptional circumstances. We're realistic about this. We know unforeseen things happen, but generally this should be the exception rather than the rule, and you do now need to let us know on each occasion when this happens. Just like the exceptions form that Catherine was talking about a second ago, there is now an online form specifically for this on the 4748 qualification page. Please be aware that you can still potentially hold paper exams anything up to 5 working days either side of the original date, notwithstanding now the need to tell us. But if you need to move the date by more than those 5 days, then it will be necessary to make a new booking. Likewise, the Evolve system will now let you vary the date by up to 10 days either side. Again, you'll still need to complete the online form, but if you need more latitude than that, you'll need to avoid the original booking and then reschedule. The latest version of the ICE document, do make sure you have this, spells all of this out. Now moving on to maths. Let's have a closer look at the go live with maths and what the current position is. So if we have a look at entry level first, it's one test with 2 distinct sections. So there's one overall pass mark for the assessment as a whole. The 2 assessments can be done in separate sessions and in either order, as long as there's no teaching between the two sessions. You can't do them several months apart. The timing, and this is a familiar pattern, 25 minutes for the non-calculator section and then 65 minutes for the calculator permitted section. What you can't do is bank additional time from one session and carry it over into the other. The 2 have their own distinct time allowance. So level 1, level 2.
Again, if you have one test with 2 sections. Those sections must be taken together. These exams will be carried out in the set order of the non-calculator section first, with a time allowance of 25 minutes. Next, the calculator permitted section is taken with 80 minutes time allowance. The timings are set and additional time cannot be carried over, as Paul stated earlier. The rules around candidates only ever seeing each assessment paper once means that the way that the candidates are allocated papers may impact on the way papers are grouped for delivery to centres. When booking for a group or cohort, the system will identify a version that no one has seen before, but it may be the order that they will be delivered in a number of packs. We have key documents for mathematics to help you with the reformed functional skills. These can be found on the 4748 qualification page. These include qualification handbooks, one at entry level and another at level 1 and level 2. We also have an assessor instructions for entry level. Assessors must have access to this document at least 4 weeks prior to the assessment. Now let's have a closer look at English.
Again, similar to maths, the rules around candidates only ever seeing each paper once mean that there are now some changes to the way in which we distribute paper tests. And because the system will always try to identify a version that nobody has seen before, but it is possible, indeed quite likely, that sometimes you will get more than one pack against a single order. At entry level, there's now a spelling test, and this will form part of the writing section. The list of words that we will be testing as part of that test are provided within the subject content document, the DFE document that underpins all functional skills English qualifications. Speaking, listening and communicating has a bit of a change, slight change to its title, but there is now also a slightly additional task at levels 1 and level 2. And the other big change is that all 3 components of English must now be achieved at the same level. It's no longer possible to recognise spiky achievement at varying levels.
Looking at reading, this slide sets out the timings for each assessment. Candidates will need to read from 2 source documents and then answer questions on these. At level 1 and 2, candidates will have to compare the content across both source documents. At entry level, candidates are expected to be able to read the words designated for each of the levels. The reading assessment is designed to meet 100% coverage of the subject content at all levels.
Moving on to writing, at entry level, as I was saying a second ago, candidates will need to complete both a writing composition task and the spelling task. Those can be done, they're self-contained, so they can be conducted separately in consecutive sessions as long as there's no teaching or preparation in between. And a bit like the calculator, non-calculator sections for maths, there is no pass mark for each of those 2 sections. There is an overall pass mark for the writing component as a whole. So marks are sort of totaled up between the 2 activities. The writing task is designed to assess both written composition and SPAG, spelling, punctuation and grammar. The spelling task, self-evidently, is designed to assess candidates' spelling using the designated words for each entry level. The overall assessment weighting is split roughly equally between writing, composition and SPAG. So within the writing composition task, there are marks for content effectively and marks for accuracy. At level 1, level 2, there's no spelling test, but the assessment, the exam, requires candidates to produce 2 texts based on a given scenario in each case. The writing assessment is designed to provide 100% coverage of the subject content at all levels. Moving on to speaking, listening and communicating, worth saying that these timings are a guide, they're not an absolute. If it ends up being 31 minutes or if it ends up being 21 minutes, nobody's going to worry too much about that. But what this is trying to get across is that it should be roughly 30 minutes active input per learner. And it's important to note that for speaking, listening and communicating, that's kind of going to need to be a little bit fluid, particularly where you've got larger groups taking part in discussions. It's a bit of using your discretion, and it's keeping the assessment to a reasonable size.
On to speaking, listening, communicating at entry level. There is one internal assessment completed at each entry level, and they cover 100% of the subject content. At each level, candidates will take part in 2 activities. These will be entry 1, making an appointment and a one-to-one discussion. Entry 2, exchange of information and group discussion. Entry 3, extracting information and an informal group discussion.
Moving on to level 1 and level 2, we've got now some worked examples on the website to support you with completing the paperwork. At both levels, candidates have essentially 3 activities: a formal discussion on what's termed an unfamiliar topic, a short talk or an explanation or presentation, and there are subtle differences between those 3, on a familiar topic, followed by an informal discussion with peers, and then a third activity, an informal discussion, which in many cases will follow on from that short talk, explanation or presentation that follows another candidate's input. There are some alternative ways in which that third task can be completed. We'll be covering that in more detail in another session.
As with the maths, we have key documents to support you with the reformed functional skills found on the 4748 qualification page, including qualification handbooks, one at entry level and another at level 1 and level 2. Also in assessor instructions, assessors again must have access to this document at least 4 weeks prior to the assessment. So in our live webinars, we will have time for questions and answers.
So don't ask any questions now because this is recording. But just to give you a little bit more information on the reforms, you can, as we were saying at the beginning of the session, go to our Maths and English web pages for updates specifically relating to functional skills. You'll see that there is a specific functional skills updates page. If you have any general operational questions, the standard customer support or customer service email address is centresupport@sittinggirls.com. Worth also saying, if you're following us on social media, we are moved away from using the Fun Skills 2019 hashtag. We think it might start to date fairly soon, given we're getting towards the end of the calendar year. So we will now be using hashtag CG Maths and English to sort of underpin our social media conversation about Maths and English. You can, of course, follow us, and you can see our Twitter sort of handles up here on this slide. We will be back. The next sort of recorded session will be looking more closely at speaking, listening and communicating. So it just remains to thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.